Hi everyone, welcome to our fourth episode of the Open Shelf. This episode is going to be about Winning by Jack Welch. Before we start the episode, just want to give everyone some background why we are using this book. Who's the man behind this book? Jack Welch was CEO about 20 years in GE from 1981 to 2001, and he transformed GE from 12 billion company to 400 billion powerhouse. And this is like something that Jack Welch be known about to grow the GE more than 3,000%. And GE is really big enterprise that they are in several industry from aviation, energy, healthcare, and so much more. And they are really known to be one of the most powerful organization with this scale. Why we are going to discuss about Jack Welch and what is he known for? He's known for his famous differentiation differentiation model that we're gonna deep dive within this episode regarding boundaryless organization, that he removed all obstacles and silos within the organization, and relentless efficiency that he have. And we're gonna deep dive on those topics furthermore. And before we start this, I would love to also give you a background why we have this episode in the first place. We have Vlad with us in this episode, which is head of customer service currently in Vivid Group, and he was head of customer service in BBG. And in his farewell, the whole team for him threw a really nice farewell party, and they drink from their own country and food from their own country. The discussion started from there. That Vlad, tell me how you did this bonding, that in the farewell everybody is like they care so much, and how did you make this bonding? And we decided to have this episode after that, and winning was one of the things that we wanted to discuss about. Vlad, please give us a little bit of introduction about yourself, why you choose this book and to discuss about in this episode, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much, guys. A pleasure seeing you again, and a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for the invitation. First of all, about myself, I've been more than 15 years, actually, how time passes. I've been more than 15 years in the professional services industry, and around 12 and a half years in business process outsourcing. And this is how I run into Jack Welch, because I had the fortune I was fortunate to work in a company for 11 years, which was indirectly founded by Jack Welch. So the company, which was founded back at the end of the 90s, out of which Genpact, the company which I work for, emerged, was a GE company. And as you can imagine, in this company, the legacy of Jack Welch has continued to live and to exist. So I had the privilege, let's say, to actually live all his, applied, not only theories, applied methodologies when it comes to leadership, when it comes to management, performance management, encouraging people to take decisions. So all this was part, and I have a lot of stories and I have things to share about this. And actually, he inspired me a lot, because in that almost 12 years, I learned so many things. And for me, that Genpact was more or less how I grew my career, my professional knowledge in the cultural setup of GE, with learning to live with and think with design thinking in my head, with Lean Six Sigma, all those very important cornerstones that GE had at the time of Jack Welch and even afterwards. So happy to speak about the book. I read it. I actually had the opportunity to see the man himself. I was present in Bucharest in a conference in 2007 where he was a speaker about this book, actually. So that sort of blended exactly it was clear that his thought leadership is going to stick with me for quite a while.
Great. Then, okay, we are going to have our first chapter. I'll pass it to Willem to bring us up to speed how we want to have this chapter.
Exactly. Many thank you again for having me on board. Vlad, it's an absolute pleasure chatting with you again, sir. I'm very, very much looking forward to it. I think with regards to relentless efficiency and the bureaucracy that it cuts through, I might have not been the best partner to spar with when it came to the previous position we shared, but we're going to have an absolute blast of this. So the plan for today's episode is we're going to do 3 different chapters. We're going to cover some high-level topics, and we're going to dig in a little bit deeper with regards to Vlad, what it means to you, to me, and to Mehdi, and how we sort of live some of the very, very interesting things that Jack mentions in the book Winning. We're going to have a look at chapter 1 being more about the philosophy of winning. Chapter 2, we're going to look a little bit into company mechanics and leadership. And then very lastly, we're going to dig in a little bit into career growth as well, and how to sort of plan that career and how to manage it effectively, and what it meant for you, Vlad, as well, because I think it's quite interesting, even having been there physically, to sort of see someone speak about a topic where you can personally relate and actually buy into that message as well. So without further ado, I reckon we should dig into the very first chapter, right? Awesome. Like so we're going to talk a little bit about the philosophy of winning. Now, interestingly, what I got out of it, Jack Welch has this core about very bold leadership with relentless performance and this no-nonsense management style, which I think is very indicative of that time within companies when he was sort of cutting his teeth and how he sort of worked through becoming that very powerful CEO and building this very visionary leadership style. So I think, Vlad, you also highlighted a little bit about, how understanding Welch is underpinning a lot of the success that you had. And of course, this very bold ambition of GE to become this, like, the most competitive and most innovative company. And I mean, you don't say something like that if you don't mean it. That's a very, very bold statement. And as you get the sense, as you go through the book, you sort of start understanding this drove everything that he did, every decision that he sort of made. I think within the book as well, it's very interestingly structured if we look at the philosophy of winning, because I like the way the chapters sort of flow, where you have this very, the conceptual philosophy, there's, the core mechanics that he hands over, and oh my goodness, I think Mehdi, Vlad, I'm a sucker for a decent process. Oh, you give me a decent process, I'm a happy camper, hey. And then, of course, talking a little bit about, you're not going to be there alone. And I think this is the sort of candor part of Welch as well. There is going to be competition. There is going to be strife. There's going to be difficulties. And then how you then, as a person within this framework, then essentially manage your career. So I think the philosophy of winning, as it's structured in the book, has this very, very interesting flow to it, which I think is still very relevant in today's modern age, even though it comes from a very, very tough sort of point of view from back in the day. And I think an interesting part to start with, Vlad, is visionary leadership. I mean, you just mentioned this, What was it like sitting in Bucharest, in that town hall, seeing Welch up on the stage, talking about the concepts of winning? Was there something specifically about that intensity that sort of came over, that spoke to you, that you sort of felt as you started with Janpack?
Yes, so actually I saw Jack and Susie Welch. They were both on the stage.
You're the co-writer of the book, yeah?
Yes, the co-writer of the book. They were at that time quite known as a power couple. She was also a Harvard Business Review collaborator, and she was also into development. If you know, they even founded a leadership university in which they were teaching or preaching Jack Welch's concepts, and it was quite amazing, right? Because they were, first of all, he was a great speaker. Although he's quite advanced age, he was a great speaker. He was able to energize the audiences, and I remember the way he started the conversation. He asked all of us, guys, do you know what SSDD means? And everybody in the room was looking around and saying, no, it means same shit, different day. Now, the question is, he said, do you want to live this or do you want to make a difference? Do you want to compete in order to win or not? But then he clearly said, compete only if you have a competitive advantage. So if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. So I liked the challenge or the challenging attitude. So something like, if you have the balls or if you have the guts, go and do it. Otherwise, stay there where you are, which actually brought me around the thought. I mean, do I need to stay in the comfort zone and do same shit different day, or should I do something in order to become that competitive advantage? And for me, it was clear that continuously upgrading myself, being in beta all the time, learning new things every day, which is not reading in books, but okay, you also read articles, obviously you're connected to different business environment, but applying things every day, I think that's the most important thing. Yeah, so it started with that. This is where my love for Jack started. So I will always remember this SSDD thing for the rest of my life, because it was such a cool icebreaker, but at the same time something that puts your mind at thought, and when you say, interesting thought, it puts me thinking, right? So yeah, this is how it started.
Yeah, I think what really stuck with me is during the book, there was this whole, it's towards the end of it, but there was this whole thing about putting yourself forward, putting yourself there, your true self. I think the analogy or the story he told was sort of as she was interviewing for this position, he stumbled into the door, into this room full of suits that were essentially just like sitting there, and she just made a joke and says, "Hi, I'm the dance teacher," something like that. And because you're showing your true self and you're getting your true self back, I think this builds that very, very sort of like a very honest initial bond, right?
Exactly. Right. Like within this winning, he started with this 4 principle that it shaped everything for winning. First principle was a strong vision and concrete values. And when it's come to that principle, he was mentioning you should not use buzzwords. It should be crystal clear. And the value is the behavior. And what you really behave is the value. And when it's come to vision, it was saying like if you wake an employee up at 2 a.m. asking what is the vision, you should be able to say so. What is resonate with you when it's come to the strong vision and concrete values?
So I think the vision was, as I just mentioned earlier, it started with the fact that if you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. So that starts with that. That sets up the bar already very high. Then, of course, it is very important to upgrade yourself. So one of my favorite quotes from the book, and I will try to put it accurately, is before you become a leader, you need to upgrade and grow yourself to be successful. And when you become a leader, then you're in charge about growing others. So your success is not measured against you anymore, is measured against how you grow others. And this is actually what I also personally followed in my career. I actually take a lot of pride about the fact that I have influenced positively the career of many people I have worked with, and it was really warm-hearting to see, feedback. If you happen to have a look at my CV or at my LinkedIn profile, you will see a lot of people who are testifying that. And when I look back about how many people I have interacted with, and I have coached and groomed myself from being a very small senior agent up to a team lead and operations manager, and later on they are now leading large teams in different other organizations outside Genpact. I take really big pride of that, and this is what I try and continue to do also everywhere I was working afterwards. And even in BBG, if you to go back to your initial thought in what have I done that people love me? Okay, I have not managed to grow people significantly, but I have definitely impacted positively the life of a few, which I have gave them the opportunity to explore new roles, to explore new responsibilities, even if they're not maybe experienced in that. But I believed in the potential. And I think later on we will talk about, this is also coming from Jack, what performance and potential means, because they are two things that go hand in hand.
Ooh, very true.
Yeah, definitely agree there. I think one of the things that also stood out for me is that as a leader, when you set the sort of visions for teams, Jack wasn't really a opposed to horizontally moving someone that wasn't particularly an expert within that specific field. Because if he sort of mentions, the people that he chose might have, been from, let's say, the aeronautical side of the business, where essentially he took that person, put them in China to lead a completely different section because the vision is there. There's a shared ownership with regards to what they want to achieve. And they believe so wholeheartedly that it's, again, almost forcing them to step out of the box, like you mentioned, right?
Step out of the comfort zone. Yeah, that's the thing.
Exactly.
Right.
I think it was also important. It is also important to mention the fact that, and I felt this and experienced this myself for almost 12 years in Genpact. So he created this organizational competition. What does this mean? It was not just a competition for necessarily promoting or just for career advancement. And we will talk about the 2710 structure, which was also important. But it instilled that competitiveness in yourself, that you wanted to grow above and beyond, you wanted to become a better self, and it was a healthy competition against your peers who were also in the same. And it was also a prestige thing, right? Being recognized, being praised, and being amongst the top 20% of the high performance, which was key to that element. Yeah, so that was a constant drive and push towards wanting to do more and achieve more. I think that was also very important cornerstone of his vision when it came to workforce and performance management, internal career development, and culture in G.
Right. And now the second principle that he was discussing in this book was candor, which Jack Welch is really well known about it. Like, to that extent that he was mentioning his boss used to tell him, your candor is going to stop you to grow within the organization. And he mentioned, and that candor really bring him to the pinnacle of his achievement. We, in our previous episode, a book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott, we went on nitty-gritty details of candor, which means this candor is something that it's coming over and over again. It's a principle that people, they live by, successful people. When it's come to candor and your leadership style, what do you have to share with us?
I think it's all about being open, honest, and transparent. No beating around the bush, no bullshitting. It doesn't help anyone sugarcoating a reality that should not be there. So I always said to myself, and also in the lights of others, let's be fair to each other and face reality as it is. It doesn't make any sense to, portray it as we think it should be or we wish it could have been. Of course, being nice and being polite is still part of the, I think, primary education. Candor doesn't mean to be rude, right? Because there are so many managers, not leaders, because leader is not equal manager, who are actually tend to be rude when they are candid. They mistaken rudeness for candidness. So candid means be open, be sincere. Even if the reality is painful for that person, he or she will thank you later. And actually, I had two such examples when I had to give, I never called it bad feedback. It's constructive feedback. It's always constructive, right? Because you're at the bottom of the sea and you cannot go down below. I mean, it can only get better, right? So this is why I call it constructive. You're on the ground.
Hopefully. Yes.
You're on the ground. I mean, you only can build up, not down. So that's why it's called constructive feedback, and it might be heart shattering. Maybe some people don't even have perceived that the reality was that bad, let's say, and then still they embraced the feedback and later on and they moved on. So I think that is the most important part of this candor.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was when he mentioned it, the biggest dirty little secret in business. Can you imagine it just being open, honest, and transparent, right? Who would have thunk? And I mean, personally, for me, it was absolutely great seeing that just as a small concept being now sort of addressed as a bigger framework, to reach a wider audience as well, just makes me happy. And I mean, I completely agree with you, Vlad. It's the fact that, candor doesn't necessarily have to be confrontational. It's hard truths that sometimes need to be spoken. But again, everybody's here to grow. Nobody's right all the time. And just being that open and honest conversation. I think it was kind of nice to see how passionate Jack was about making sure that you understand that this is a foundational principle. And, this whole thing we mentioned, the lack of it, it's very much why companies are, slow, mostly confused. There's just so many different layers of bureaucracy. And then, of course, you have all of this. It just ends up being decisions that's not particularly effective in my point of view.
No. It isn't. It isn't. And it is not in business. It is not always about protecting someone else's feelings, to be honest.
No.
Business is about money. Willem, to your point, because you said you love processes, he actually put this Candor in a framework. This is the 27 rule, which was the biannual performance review cycle, which was called Session C. Nobody knew when. When I joined Gempact, I was asking why it is called our biannual performance review cycle is called Session C. And I remember my HR leader saying, we don't know. This is how it was called in GE. So we just took it. We didn't have another name. So we will speak about Session C and how this was done, about the famous 9 blocker, and about the fact that this process actually triggered these Candor discussions. Because you had to speak to the person, to give feedback to a top performer, to give feedback to a HV70. So there, let me put the dichotomy behind that. Top 20, HV70, which meant highly valued 70, and least LE10 or LE10, which was least effective 10%. So you need to give feedback also to the LE10, which obviously is a tough discussion because usually it ends up either with a second chance or with showing the door. But when you guys are ready, I will talk about more about that.
This is the third principle that we would love to go deep dive, which is power of differentiation. Top 20, middle 70, and bottom 10. This is something that also Jack Welch was mentioning. At first, you need to have the trust and candor within the organization to be able to really work on this. And in different culture, it's perceived differently. When you want to give the feedback, when you want to differentiate, it's in different culture is really tricky. There is this book about culture map, and Erin Meyer described about it that sometimes in one culture, they try to give that you have really bad performance, and other culture they perceive it the other way around. Wow, it was the best feedback I ever get, because of these cultural things that it make it really, really tricky. Let us know, Vlad, like how this works in real life, because in words it seems easy, but when it's come to practice, it's hell of a work.
All right, so I've been in my almost 12 years there, I've been doing this so I was, of course, part of it as being an employee. I was doing this for my teams and together with my operations managers and team leads for their teams. And for a period of 4 years, I was an HR business partner in Gempact. And this is also about giving opportunity, about job rotation, and about exploring something else. And I was, as an HR business partner, organizing this for the operations teams I was responsible for, and I was leading the conversation. So the way this was done, every 6 months, so it was a mid-year review and a year-end review. Leaders were asked to rate the performance and the potential of their direct reports. It was a 9 blocker with an XY scale, where you, on the X scale you had the ratings, which were the top 20, 70, LE10, and on the Y you had the potential, which was low, middle, and high. So the ideal place to be was HV middle, let's say. When you're in the middle, it means you are a good employee who performs against all her goals, doesn't stand out, doesn't want to do it, doesn't necessarily have the potential to do more. It's just there, it's serving the business. We want to have these people. These are the highly valued people. Then you have the top 20. These are the ones that the go-getters. They go beyond and above. They overachieve their targets. They bring new ideas. This is also about the best place to be is the top 20 high performance. That's also the place where at the end of the year, there were promotions decided or role changes. Promotions not necessarily having to move into a higher band or with a higher salary. It could also be a lateral move, but it was also the place where it was decided this person high potential, which means he can either do a higher role or is up for a promotion. Now, there was also the LE10. So the LE10, it was usually the people who were failing to meet their objectives. And then the potential was the one differentiating what is the next step. If you had an employee who was LE10, maybe high potential, although that's not quite usual, or mid potential, it would have mean, okay, this guy deserves a second chance. Maybe he had a bad year, or I don't know what happened.
Fair enough.
But we still think he can add value to the organization and save himself. But if it is someone with low potential and LE10 rating, we usually show this person the door. So it's about it's like in the football league, the top 20 goes in the Champions League and the LE10 is going in the second league, right, which is outside the organization. So it's about the health of the organization. And it was very interesting because we were blocking ourselves for 2 full days in a room where we looked at this 9 blocker. Every business leader or operations leader had like 2 or 3 of the direct reports on that map. And he was presenting the achievements and explaining why he gave this rating in front of the organization. And you can imagine the discussions when it comes to defending and doing comparison. One doing the other thing, one doing the other thing. So you could then see, even if there were different scales, the differentiation, the different mindset and rule set and bar that every leader has applied. And at the end of the exercise, this 2710 was not like mandatory in the sense that it really needs to hit that number, because you were then taking the ratings and dividing them by the number of total ratings, and that was your percentage. It was more of a guideline. But we had situation in like people said, no, all my direct reports are top 20.
Amazing.
And then the question came, okay, then your bar is too low. Or do you want to promote all of them? Do you have roles for all of them? Can you give them all opportunities to learn and to grow? No, I'm relying on you guys to give me opportunities in your field, because we were a large organization with 2,500 employees. But that's how the discussions went for 2 days. Cannibalization sometimes between leaders about who stays at top 20 and we move people down or left. This was called forced ranking. This was the process of moving some people in that 9 blocker after debating internally and saying, hey, maybe your guy is still not a top 20 high, maybe he's a high value 70, because if you compare him to others in the organization, he may not have achieved the same. So that was the process.
That's super, super interesting that you actually spend so much time doing this, and especially that it's a collaborative leadership sort of effort as well. So, I mean, my personal thing is I like measuring things. It comes from a decade in data. And normally what's quite interesting, especially when you talk about something like performance of someone within a team, it's a very subjective measure that from you as a leader's perspective comes from a lifetime of experience that you've put together. Is there anything interesting where you feel like in this 2-day discussion with the rest of the leaders that you that challenged your perspective a little bit, or where you had to sort of challenge another leader's perspective, exactly where someone might have their rose-colored glasses on, someone might have not had their second cup of coffee that morning. Was there anything sort of like interesting that happened within those 2 days that you experienced that's sort of impacted your perspective?
So in principle, the discussions, as you said, it's about numbers. You cannot be 100% objectives, because when you speak about potential is not measurable.
No.
Potential is a subjective gut feel, I would say. It's a gut feel. I mean, do you see the potential? And of course, you can argument and say that person has done this and this and this in those areas, so he clearly has the potential to do several other things outside his comfort area. That's a measurable, or more or less. But other than that, you cannot say. For performance, still, there were the classical meeting the KPIs, having the NPS of the customer, attrition rate, fluctuation rate was very, very important. we were navigating our fluctuation target was 20% annually. We were gravitating around 20% annually. When I first came to Germany and started with Majorel, I remember my boss said at that time, Vlad, this year, please do it with 2 digits. Please make it with 2 digits. So the fluctuation was above 100%. So in the previous years, that was the bar. And of course, then you came to what has this person done personally that contributed to the organization and to himself? Did he started a project, cross-functional project, or did he lead something, or at least successfully? Did he do a green belt certification? Green belt certification, by the way, was usually done on a project which you were implementing in your operations. My own green belt certification, which I done in 2014, was about a project for one of my customers I was working with in the finance and accounting area. So this was how it was usually done. And by the way, it was a mandatory criteria for promotion, not for a role change.
Wow.
You would get a role change, but it was a mandatory criteria for promotion. If you want to get promoted to operations manager, you were needing mandatory a green belt certification.
Well, if the expectation is to fix leaky pipes, then hopefully someone gives you the tools to help you do that. Right?
Yeah, we had a quite large quality function. We had our own black belts and Lean Six Sigma experts who were certified, recognized internationally. So we had really like a good solid base to a tutorship for projects with someone from quality, like a sparring partner. So you are not on your own, because
Perfect.
it was about, DMIC principle: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So this is the 5 steps of any Lean Six Sigma project. Quite a process for you, Willem.
Love it, man. Love it.
Great. That brings us to the 4th principle, value of individual voice and dignity. Like Jack Welch believed that you need to give everybody voice and recognize their contribution. This is also something that we have a book called Ask Your Developer. Within that book, they mentioning that illustrating that developers that they are working with the software, especially when it comes to software industry, they are working with this day in and out, and they are the one that they know what is best and how they can make things even better. And giving voice to them, hearing them out, is something that can bring the organization to a whole new level. When it's come to value of the individual, voice and dignity, what is your experience?
So the experience which I had was, first of all, it was in the culture of the company, and I know this is what GE did, to do town halls. So leaders coming and speaking to teams, to large teams, usually in person at the time because we did not have COVID, but for remote teams, obviously there was a video conference. Having in the people practices, very important, having established people practices without fail, which means every employee needs to have a one-on-one with his manager 1 time a month, mandatory, period.
Wow. Okay.
Skip level meetings, which means myself as a manager, every 2 months or 3 months at least, I need to go and talk to the team of my direct report. So if I have a team lead, I need to talk to his team without the team leader. So in the absence, so it's a skip level, I'm skipping the level of management.
Yeah.
I'm going and talking to the agents, have a round with them 1 hour, asking them how they are, what they do, are they happy, are they not happy, does anyone make them unhappy, even the team lead. And then I do this and I document this. So this was part of mandatory people practices that we have, plus an early warning system, which was very important. It was like based on every interaction, conversation, or even a side discussion, or every perception which you had about the person, the early warning system was a subjective but proactive way of foreseeing potential fluctuation. So you had a red, amber, green status. So if I sensed from one of my employees that he was demotivated, he was having some difficulties, some challenges adapting and so on, I would go in my tool and put the person on amber. However, if I do find out that the person is starting to looking outside and going to interviews or is really planning on leaving, I will put the person in and I will also mention what is the likelihood. In 1 month, in 3 months, in 2 months, and so on. So this was constantly reviewed by operations managers and HR to actually already plan replacement. And very, very important, sticking back to the session C, which we discussed earlier. At the end of the second day, there was half a day planned for career discussions, which meant what roles does the organization has available in which we can put those top performers, high performers into based on their skill sets and on their interest. And it was like it was like an eBay for roles, if you want, like an auction house for roles, where people will come and leaders will position their people and say, hey, that's a good role for that person. Can he lead a larger team? Can he do this consultants project for a new customer? Can he become a quality leader? Can he become a whatever? I don't know. So this was the way in which has put the career forward and the development forward. So it was all about that, those people practices and those close connect about giving the people also the possibility to talk, right? The open door policy, it was very important. And the internal coaching and mentoring platform, also very important. So we as leaders were asked to coach and mentor. So coaching was more or less the part which you did anyway on a day-to-day basis because you had to coach your own team. Mentorship was about something else. So I was myself a mentor for 5 or 6 years, which meant another junior, let's say more junior role, an operations manager or a team lead from another business vertical, from another operation setup, came to me and asked for me to be his mentor or her mentor. And then we started having those open discussions. What is your aspiration? Where do you want to grow into? How can I help you? How can I share things from my experience? How can I guide you? It was always about mentorship is not about working with someone you know and you work on a daily basis. That's not mentoring, that's coaching. Mentoring is with someone who comes from a different background, who doesn't know you, who has a different experience and is willing to learn and discuss her experience and exchange it with you. So those were, I would say, the main core opportunities to speak up and to embrace this, career thriving path.
Yeah, I think interestingly for me is when we were doing the episode on radical candor with Amy, there was this very interesting concept that came out, which is this emotional labor, which for me was such a crystallizing moment because, Vlad, as you speak of it, within this framework, it's not that you as a leader can sit back. There's so much effort that you need to put in to make sure that people essentially do get, this voice within the company, their dignity is essentially respected. It is quite interesting to see how much of that effort you needed to put in here and how much of that was systematized, because a lot of people think, it's something that just happens naturally, but it's quite crystallizing to hear someone speak about the actual effort that you've got to put in to make sure that, you do have that very low sort of attrition rate as well.
Vlad, you was mentioning regarding the town halls, and within winning, Jack Welch called it, workout process, that they gather together from different part of the world and they ensure that everybody's idea is heard. And so many things come out of those workout sessions. And the framework was in a way based on the explanation in the book that the person in charge need to say direct yes or no to idea for 75% of the things that he hear. Yeah, this is a good idea, we want to work on it, or no, this is not something that we can spend on time. And around 25% of it, he have 30 days to get back to it to see whether they want to invest or not. Do you have any experience regarding that G workout process, and is there anything that in particular you would like to share with us?
Yeah, we did a lot of workouts which were similarly to the process which you just described. Everything started with a brainstorming exercise and everyone's opinion. So there was a clear policy that there are there are no stupid ideas or no just no stupid statements, just stupid questions. So something like that. I would flip it around, or I would put even more emphasis on that, just for you to understand how such ideas emerged. Being Lean Six Sigma company and living and breathing Lean Six Sigma, I'm not talking now about yellow belt or green belt certification, which were mostly about a more advanced stage once you get to know the Lean Six Sigma techniques like the 5S and so on and so Kaizen and so on and so forth. But even at the lowest agent level, everybody was getting a lean training. So lean was really a way of living, a standard of living in the company. And then at agent level, we had every quarter lean ideas contest. So every employee was encouraged in a one pager to come up with a lean idea. So we were gathering like hundreds of ideas and we were churning them. Of course, some of them were unrealistic and some of them were not like really measurable, but we were churning ideas which we were turning them into implementable ideas. And those employees were rewarded. They were receiving lean certification, which was the pre-certification before they actually could have done a green belt or a yellow belt certification, right? And they were awarded those awards in a town hall in front of the whole organization, receiving praise and being encouraged to further. And they were like, then we developed Lean 3-star, 5-star, 7-star certifications, which means if you have 3 ideas which got implemented, you have Lean 3-star certification, 5-star, 7-star. So if you then become Lean 7-star certified, you become a Lean champion, which gives you the possibility to collaborate with the quality team. And usually those guys were chosen as quality analysts as soon as the position was made available. So it was a promotion path towards entering the quality path. So in GE, same as in Genpact, because it was the same, right? There were 2 paths. There was the management or leadership path, which you go if you want to manage people and large divisions and be in operations and so on, and the expert path or the SME path, where you go if you want to become a domain expert. You can be a domain expert in the processes which you are servicing for your customer. You can be a domain expert in quality, training, HR, business development, transitions, whatever you would be fit for. Practice was also important. The practice department, which was also inherited from G, was the so-called process excellence department, which in order to cash process or a source to pay process, those were the guys who were defining how the end-to-end process should look like. They were designing the solutions which were sold to our customers and the improvements which we did in the processes for our customers, because we were like a Lean Six Sigma. People were choosing Genpact because of their Lean Six Sigma legacy at the time, right? So we had to deliver. This was the competitive advantage. We had to deliver improvement projects, which had direct impact on the cash flow. So,
I mean, this is so cool to actually sort of hear straight from you, because it does mean that if we talk about the philosophy of winning, it's not just something that a custom company lives, but by the very fact that they live it, they gain a competitive advantage because people understand how a company like that functions more to actually deliver value, and how that sort of again, maybe like you mentioned, how these ideas flow, this, the differentiation, how do you manage talent? How do people get this individual voice? That's freaking amazing. Thanks, Vlad.
Right. All right. Last thing that we want to cover in this chapter was mission statement. Jack Welch also discussed about mission statement. First of all, he said, like, what is mission and what is value? Where you're going is your mission, and how you get there is your values. The behavior that support your mission is the values. And one of the example that he was mentioning is GE is supposed to be the first or second in the market for anything. If not, whether they need to fix it, sell it, or close it. And this was the GE approach of doing things. This is a concept also Jim Collins discussed in Good to Great, call it hedgehog concept. Like they say, hedgehog doing one thing, but it doing very good. It can protect itself. And that's why it's come with the hedgehog concept. when it's come to this being first or second in the world and in that industry, what is your experience on that?
So definitely this is a famous quote or a famous approach of Jack, and I know he did this with several businesses in different countries. It comes usually in my own experience when I was in Genpact. So we didn't really do that because, keeping a customer, even if there is a contract that was maybe not so profitable anymore, and I had myself some examples of such long-lasting company contracts and client relationship where actually the contracts were not longer in our advantage. Nobody touched them, looked at them for years. The reality have changed. Maybe the staff cost has increased on our side and the rates were still the same. There was inflation, there was this and that. So nobody has looked into them. But then it came to a point where leadership decided, let's look into those contracts and let's tell the clients, for us, dear client, we value our partnership, but for us it's not working anymore. Business wise, it's not, we are losing money. So either you agree to renegotiate the contract and to pay more or whatever, or we close the contract, or from our side we pull out. That was a huge, I would say, paradigm shift, because the way it is in our current world, and usually people don't want to lose customers, even if it's not working the best, and so you still, yeah, but it's a long lasting relationship, you have those feelings of partnership, maybe you still think that potentially sometimes in the future there might arise another opportunity with this customer, and who knows what big opportunity will come. You don't want to let the customer go. But if you want to survive as a business, I think it is sometimes also important to have this candid conversation with your customer and tell him, look, for me, I value the partnership, but it doesn't work out commercially anymore. So let's have an open conversation. And I think that's something which I lived in my own world.
I mean, the quote for me there would essentially just be like, face the reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. I mean, hopes and dreams are one thing, but yeah, here we are living in the real world, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And make tough decisions, hard choices. That's it.
All right. Any closing thought for this chapter?
No,
Great.
fix, sell, and close.
Great. Okay. These are the books that we discuss about within this episode. You may also find within the description the link of the Goodreads for the books, and also we discuss about Candor, which you also can refer to our previous episode 3, that was regarding radical candor. Looking forward to see you all on our next chapter about winning. Thanks everyone.
Cheers. There we go.
Cheers.